Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a very informative and terrifying upload to share with you. Before we get into this upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Patreon and PayPal's links are in the description below. My merch store is directly below this video displayed. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Before we get into this upload, I just want to make another announcement. For those of you who have not been hearing any of the uploads that I've been doing, I do not know the name of Victor's book. I do not know any more than you guys do. I know it's going to be available on Amazon. I know that it's supposedly coming out November 19th. I say supposedly because I don't know any more than anyone else does. I would appreciate it if you guys or people would stop emailing me in regards to his book, because I don't know. It's Victor Johnson. It's going to be on Amazon, and it's supposedly coming out on the 19th. Also, he is not co-host of the channel. He is a guest on the channel. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm sorry if I am coming off rash about this, but I can not answer 30 emails a day in regards to the same thing I say on my channel every day and put out a video. As far as I'm concerned right now, I kind of wish that he didn't make the announcement until it was out. So you've got what I've got. Let's get on with this. Today's first part of the upload. Wisconsin resident David Pavlatos reports a mysterious animal print he had found in the unincorporated community of Lake Como on July 11th, 2008. Lake Como is less than 5 miles south of Elkhorn, where sightings of an upright canid known as the Beast of Bray Road gained national attention in the 90s. And within a dozen miles of the well-known Dogman sighting, areas like Richard Bong State Recreation Area and the southernmost units of the Kettle Moraine State Forest. Investigator Tobias Whalen interviewed David over the phone, after which a written statement detailing the sighting. According to David, he came across the print in the mud along the path leading to his dock on Lake Como in Wisconsin. My boat was at the dock and needed to be bailed out because it had rained the night before. This was something that I have to do every time it rains due to an ill-fitting boat cover, he said. I had traveled from my rental property about 1/8 of a mile away to where my dock was located and was in a rush to bail out the boat and still make it to work on time. I walked down the path to the boat and noticed the print in the mud before stepping onto the dock. The area right before the dock was worn down to the mud due to it being the last step before stepping up onto the actual wooden pier. I looked down and almost stepped onto what I saw as a huge dog-looking print. I'm aware of what dog prints look like because I worked at a vet clinic in Chicago where we would make prints in clay of dogs that had to be euthanized. David didn't have a tape measure on him, so he placed first his foot and then his hand next to the print in an attempt to provide an accurate scale. The print itself was about 2 feet from the actual shoreline, with it being parallel to the shore, with a slight turn toward the water, he said. The print was 7.5 inches long and almost 5 inches wide, and the depth was 1 inch. This was not made in soft earth due to as I had said before, this being the last area to step before getting on the pier. This was constantly stepped on and packed down. The makeup of the area was mud with some sand and small pieces of gravel. By comparison, the largest tracks of any canine, those left by wolves, are about 5 inches long and 4 inches wide. Gosling feathers were all over the ground near the print, added David, although he can't confirm that this animal had anything to do with that. Prior to leaving for work, David broke off some sticks to mark the location of the print, hoping that it wouldn't be stepped on or destroyed. Then, impressed by the print's extraordinary size, he contacted the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources once he got to work. David said he was told, "Do not worry about it," by an officer with whom he had spoke to. However, he said I pressed the issue that this print was abnormally large and convinced him to look at the picture I had taken, along with pictures I took at work measuring my hand length and width. Within the hour, I received a phone call from the officer asking for the exact location of the dock and print. David followed up with a call and email to the WDNR, but said he never received any response. He was concerned about what kind of animal may have left the print, since even his dog-friendly neighbor had never seen a dog that could have made a track like this. After David went back to look for the track, but it had been trampled along with the sticks that he had placed near it. The next day he showed the photos of the track to his neighbor, who said didn't seem overly concerned. His neighbor did show him a print left by his 90-pound Rottweiler, and according to David, they weren't even close to the same size. He never offered any info on seeing anything out of the ordinary in the area. When he showed the photos to his friend who worked at a bar within a view of the dock and mentioned that he had called the WDNR, his friend remarked that he had seen the WDNR truck parked near the lake the morning after the print was found. I asked him if he had talked to them, and he said no, David said. He then said that if I had showed him the pics ahead of time, he would have. According to investigator Tobias, Wayland reached out to the WDNR. He was told by Nathan Holbeck, a wildlife biologist for the organization, that the print was a dog print. The nail marks indicate that it was canine, and the very rounded shape of the characteristic of a domestic dog. No mention was made by Holbeck of the print's size when explaining his determination. But the anomalous canine print was not the only unusual experience had by David around that time. The day before he found the print, David said his house was shaken by a huge boom that he could not explain. I was sitting in my living room watching TV with my golden retriever Lou, when there was a huge boom on the other end of my house. The closest thing I can compare it to was like when a hockey player gets slammed into the boards. I remember it startled me and my dog to the point where he immediately started barking and running to that end of the house, and I got up and followed. I looked out the back patio door that looked out over the extra lot that was all fenced in with a 3-foot-high chain-link fence. I didn't see anything out there, so with my dog still barking, I decided to let him out. My golden was the typical golden that thought every living thing was his friend and would chase after every furry creature, not to attack but to make friends. People were a great thing to him, as he thought every person was put on this earth with the duty to pet him. So, he didn't really ever show any fear of approaching anything or anyone. But in this case, I opened the door. He stepped out, then backed himself up into the house and continued to bark. Not a vicious bark, but one of alarm. I was not that scared of what was going on. Now, if I had seen that track beforehand, my concern would have been far much greater. Later that night, before going to bed, I did load and walk out onto the porch with my shotgun, pressing my back up to the house because I didn't want to have my neighbors see me and think I may be a nut. I didn't notice anything out there, nor did my dog act any differently than normal, of doing his business and running back to get his treat before bed. David doesn't necessarily believe that there is any connection between the events, but felt it was important to make any potential details available. So, just to be clear, I don't want to say there was any correlation between the events of the night before I found the print to what I heard at my house, along with the response of my dog, he states. I never saw what made the track, heard or smelled anything out of the ordinary. The feathers that I saw at the print site may have had zero to do with the print, along with the fact that there was no blood or remains of any gosling. It's just to put all I saw out there. Well, as we know, Elkhorn and the surrounding areas are a hotspot for dogman sighting. And this, to me, is just dogman behavior. Moving on. Today's second part of the upload. While at an Army military police school, my brother-in-law, Craig Miles of Boise, Idaho, met a Vietnam veteran that recalled a low-altitude special force drop in the interior during 67-68. It was the middle of the night. There were no villages for 15 miles. For a period of 3 nights, they heard choking and gurgling noises. On the 4th day, they found the upper half of a decomposed Bigfoot-like creature. It had been blown in half by something and not them. This was apparently not the noise they had heard, a mate possibly. This was the speculation that was circulating. You could see into the body cavity, the spine, lungs, and such. All was crawling with bugs. There was shorter hair on the huge head, the eyes sunken back 1.5 inches from the brow line, and very long arms, very large and long fingers. One hand was still wrapped around a branch. He didn't say what color it was, but did mention that it had a flat nose. If the creature had its legs, the estimated height would have been around 8 feet tall. There was no sign of the lower half of the body. They were able to see the teeth, all flat, well-formed molars, except for the canines, which were longer and pointed. Seemed adapted to living in the forest with long arms and fingers, or perhaps just builds night nests like gorillas do sometimes. In notation, the matter of wild people or feral human seems to be a reoccurring phenomenon in Southeast Asia. Once, while in the Marines, I showed a Vietnamese colleague a reference in Mark Hall's hominid book to a term used for wildmen in Vietnam. He was surprised to see the word in print and explained that growing up in his village, a wild man and woman were once captured from the jungle after they had been stealing food, chickens, I think it was. Either they were killed or kept in a cage. Something unfortunate in either case. They were people, he explained, and not something ape-like by any means. But they were very dirty and had long, ragged hair, and I think that he said they couldn't talk. He seemed to suggest that while this was a rare occurrence, such incidents would be heard from time to time. Today's third part of the upload. We're all familiar with stories of Bigfoot and Sasquatch sightings, and even the tales of Yeti, the snow-covered mountains of Tibet. Now it's time to understand the Vietnamese version of the Bigfoot, the Nui Rung. They were taking a breather. A 6-man patrol from the 101st Airborne Division, LRRPs, was set up in a protective wagon wheel position, heads facing outward, feet pointed toward the center, as secure a formation as the terrain would allow, and it wasn't allowing much. The behind-the-lines patrol had taken them into a remote and difficult stretch of the mountainous jungle in the central highlands. The terrain was rugged and steep, and at night the LLRPs had to wedge themselves between trees to keep from slipping and sliding downhill. Wiping the sweat from their eyes and leaning against their heavy rucksacks, the tired LLRPs tended to loosen the straps or realign the equipment as they rested, all while watching and listening to the jungle around them. On a quiet guard, the 6 soldiers were facing out against the wall of green and brown underbrush, guarding against any Viet Cong who may have tracked them or who happened upon them by chance. The combined weight of their rucksacks, weapons, and LBE, the load-bearing equipment harness that held their web gear, was 100 pounds or so, and climbing the steep hills with that kind of load took some doing, so a break was a momentary, but a necessity. Gary Linderler was thinking that the surrounding jungle was quiet and deceptively peaceful. The forest noises, the occasional rustling of the wind through the trees, the grunts of an animal in the distance, and the sounds of birds could easily lull a soldier into a false sense of serenity, even though the war was very much around them. However, if anything was out of the ordinary, there was no indication. That is, until the small trees and underbrush just 15 yards uphill began to shake violently. Linderer's attention and the frenzied focus of the other team members turned into a commotion. On guard, the LLRPs brought up their weapons and waited. Linderer was the closest team member to the hubbub. His heart was jumping in his chest as he watched and waited for an intruder. While he was ready for a VC soldier, he wasn't ready for the face that peered through the underbrush. If it was a Viet Cong soldier, then it was a damn ugly one. An oblong head framed with hair-covered face. Dark, deep-set eyes lie between a prominent brow, and they did nothing to complement the heavy jowls and angry mouth. As it stepped into the small clearing, Linderer could see that matted reddish-brown hair ran down the creature's neck and covered most of its body. Whatever it was, it stood at least 5 feet tall, had broad shoulders, long, thick, muscular arms, a heavy torso. It walked upright. In the small clearing, it stopped and studied the Americans. "What the hell is that?" someone called out behind Linderer. "It's a rock ape," said another team member. Another team member disagreed. "No, it ain't," he said. "I've seen rock apes, and that sure as hell is not a rock ape." "It's an orangutan, isn't it?" Linderer asked, while the others kept their eyes glued on the strange creature. "Well, if it is, then he can't read a map. There are no orangutans in Vietnam." The ape-like creature soon lost interest in the 6 LRRPs, turned back the way it had come, and easily climbed back up the steep rise. "It's an ape of some kind," one of the LLRPs said. "It has to be, but then..." It wasn't. In the Central Highland region of Vietnam, in the remote province of Con Tum, where the country bumps up against Cambodia and Laos, there's mounting evidence of existence of a strange human-like creature the locals call the Nui Rung, the people of the forest. While the Montagnards and other tribal people have believed that the non-human species have inhabited the region for centuries, scientists now say there may be something more to the folktale and legend. Toward the end of the American war in Vietnam, numerous sightings by Viet Cong and NVA soldiers of ape-like creatures walking upright became so overwhelming that the North Vietnamese Party secretary ordered scientists into the region to investigate the Nui Rung while the war was still going on. In 1974, as the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong pushed south to overrun the country, Professor Vo Coi of the Vietnam National University was sent into the region to conduct an investigation. Vo Coi discovered the Nui Rung footprint in the forest floor and made a cast of the impression, which was analyzed and studied by Vietnamese academics. It was wider than a human footprint and too big for an ape. The unusual find added credence to the folklore. It also set off a debate in the scientific arena. Other expeditions were mounted but yielded few results. Chance sightings of the Nui Rung continued, ranging from small creatures to large ones. Eyewitnesses had differences of opinion as to the exact color of the creature's body hair, like those cited earlier. These latest Nui Rung walked upright and were described as having human characteristics. In 1882, Professor Tran Hung Viet became the second scientist to discover Nui Rung footprints, and while scientists debated the actual existence of such creatures, many of the critics' arguments went up in smoke when zoologist John McKinnon and a team of scientists discovered 3 previously unknown mammals in the Viewquang Mountain rainforest in 1992. The discovery of the new mammals demonstrated that remote regions might well hold other new discoveries, including clues that might solve the riddle to the Vietnam's Bigfoot. Ironically, it was McKinnon who, in 1969, came across man-like footprints in the jungles of Borneo, described by the locals to the Batutut. McKinnon wrote that these toes of this creature looked quite human, and the tracks would have been about the right size for an Asiatic black bear. However, the only bear known in Borneo is the sun bear, which is considerably smaller. To this day, the controversy continues, even as international teams of scientists scour the remote mountain jungles, looking for what the local villagers say has always been there. We ran into them frequently. I had a friend whose recon position in Dung Den was overrun one night by hundreds of them. They made a noise that sounded just like a dog barking. In fact, you'd swear it was a dog. One time, on the ridge of Nu Mo Toi, about 15 kilometers south of Hoi, about 8 of them came walking up the trail and surprised a squad of our platoon while it was stopped for lunch. All hell broke loose because they looked very like NVA soldiers in khaki, same height, size, color, as they came around the bend in the trail about 10 meters from the unsuspecting GIs. I was with the other 2 squads of the platoon eating our lunch on the far side of the clearing, about 50 meters wide, that separated the 2 elements. The trails wound up the ridge and then through the clearing. All of a sudden, and without any warning, the lone squad opened up with everything they had, M16s, M79s, and hand grenades. I grabbed about 300 rounds of gun ammo and my M60, ran across the clearing with the platoon sergeant. Everyone else stayed home, to the cover of a huge toppled tree that was lying on the far side and close to the point of contact. The sergeant and I looked at one another, nodded, and then came up over the top, ready to blast away. But what we saw instead blew us away. Firing had been non-stop. We fully expected to engage a sizable enemy force, but instead we found ourselves looking at our men, some seated, some standing, some kneeling, and firing at these ghostly images swooshing around in the brush and trees, some off the ground by that point in all directions. All except one was light brown to reddish brown in color, and about 4.5 feet tall. One dark, almost black male remained fighting to protect the other's retreat, and he was flying through the branches and rushing the men with his teeth bared. He was one brave animal, I'll tell you that. Then, as if someone had snapped their fingers, they all just seemed to disappear. Zip! The male turned and flashed into the trees and was out of sight in a second. Now, this may sound very strange, but although I had no or little concern about killing the enemy, the killing of innocent animals turned my stomach and could enrage me if done without being a necessity. But I searched the site and found not a drop of blood, which totally amazed me, given the amount of firing that had gone on. I wonder to this day if the men were shooting just to scare the creature away, or whether they were just poor marksmen. The men who had suffered the surprise looked a bit worse for wear, and I'm sure a few had to wash their shorts out as a result of the unwelcome visit. It really scared the crap out of him. I'll kid you not. We, on the other hand, did suffer one casualty. A trooper had an eardrum blown out by the muzzle blast of the first shot fired because the trooper who first saw the creature just picked up his M16 and started firing without saying a word, and the muzzle was right next to this poor fellow's ear. Apart from that, I have all the same questions everyone else does and would love to know what these things were. A bit late for Veterans Day, but I was super busy all week trying to get the Tom Mezek mini documentary that I made out for the 15th. So to all of the veterans who, I believe it's veterans who died that we remember, right? You are missed. I know something very interesting that for the first time in 93 or 96 years, flowers were able to be placed at the unknown soldier's grave. And it's crazy because no one can get within feet of that. You will get shot if you do. But for some reason, they allowed it to be this year, which is truly amazing. All the men and women that have died for this great country, and our government just keeps making it worse and worse. It's sad. It really is sad. So, to those veterans who have fallen to keep our freedom safe, a brief moment of silence. Also, for those veterans who have fought and are still alive to keep our freedom safe, thank you very much. And with that, my friends, I'm going to end this upload. I want to encourage everyone to be kind to each other. May the Great Spirit watch over all of us and guide us through our path in life. And with that, farewell.